Okay. Well, again, I like to start it off with, again, just good morning. Happy 1st of December to everybody. And today we're going to be focusing on introductions in an essay. On Thursday, we will be focusing on conclusions. So I know that seems like a really basic concept, but honestly, I don't feel like most of you have been really taught how to do an introduction other than here's a bunch of sentence frames and go ahead and fill in the blank, which unfortunately doesn't really teach you how to do an introduction. It teaches you how to do fill in the blank. And what I want everybody to come away from my class with this year is the ability to write an essay for any class. Because again, once you get to college, you're going to have to start writing essays for multiple classes, even math, as crazy as that might sound. Sometimes you have to do research on a mathematician or a formula or something like that, but there is going to be more writing involved the further you get into your educational career. Even outside of education, though, it is an important skill to have. Mean, think about politicians. I mean, a lot of the same kind of ideas in writing are used for formal public speaking as well. You want to have interesting introductions. You want to explain what your speech is going to be about. So there's lots of definite like overlaps between what I'm going to be teaching you in writing and stuff like in a more public speaking kind of forum. So kind of just keep that in mind as we talk about this, even though you might not become professional writers, which some of you might, even though you're not seeking of it. Like I said, my friend, my best friend, the one who has done the podcast with me a couple of times, he writes every day for a living. It's about video games, but he still has to write. He still has to get his evidence and his sources correct when he's talking about it. So it is definitely something that any of you might use in a future career. So I definitely want you guys to all kind of be considering that. Okay, so the alpha and omega of writing. Be ready to type in the chat today. And this was adapted actually from my wife, who this is something that she teaches her college students. And it's something that I've adapted because, again, I'm always wanting to prepare you guys for the next step. I'm hoping most of you go to college. I know college isn't necessarily for everyone technically, but at the same time, um, college can open or give you lots of different avenues in your life. So I want to make sure that everybody at least has the tools that if they get to college and decide it's for them, great. You at least have the tools to make you ready. If not, it's always good to have like a backup, and you might go to school later in life too, because there's some people who start off in a career that's more physically demanding, and as people get older, obviously sometimes they have to change careers. So again, I want every one of you to be prepared. Okay, so introduction is basically a first impression you're going to give your readers about your paper. So the three primary goals are to convey the topic, engage the reader, and basically to have your thesis statement, which is usually, you might have heard this the last sentence, but it can be the last couple to like 2 to 3 sentences, depending on how complex your thesis statement is and how complex your topic is going to be. But basically, the thesis statement is your usually going to be your opinion about the topic that you're going to be discussing in your paper. So I'm going to be talking, let me not get ahead of myself, but I'm going to be each day. So today on the introductions, I'm going to explain to you 5 different strategies of introductions. So you're obviously not going to use all 5 at one time, but maybe one is like one that you gravitate towards more. Maybe there's another one that you really just don't like and don't want to use, but you guys are going to have different options. So basically what I'm doing is I'm giving you guys tool for your tool belt as far as like being writers. Like these are all tools that you'll be able to use whenever you come to any type of essay. It's like, okay, I think that this type of introduction is going to be best suited for this essay, or I think this other introduction strategy is going to be well suited for a different essay. So the first one is the inverted triangle. So most of you are probably most familiar with this model, and it's basically where you start off with a broad topic, kind of vague, and then you get more specific as it goes on. And what this does, the inverted triangle, it kind of builds suspense, because what you're doing is you're making the reader guess where is this going to take me, where's the next sentence going to be taking me. And then as you get like deeper into the introduction, you're going to find out more and more details about what the paper is going to be about. So basically, like I said, it's going to get more narrow until you get to your thesis statement. So again, start off about a broad topic, get more specific until you get to the thesis statement, which is, again, the purpose of your essay. So here's an example. I know it's a little small, but in the inverted triangle, and inverted just means like upside down. So you're starting off with a broad topic over here. So weather, bad storms, rainstorm 1996. And I had to abandon my car in a flash flood. It was the most frightening experience of my life, but I learned that I am stronger than I think. So obviously weather is pretty vague because you have to think about like what type of weather are we talking. Is it a sunny day? Is it torrential downpours? Like what kind of weather are we experiencing? So once you figured out like which type of weather, okay, so again, asking questions about each sentence. What type of weather? Bad storms. Which bad storm? Because obviously there's lots of bad storms that have existed in human existence. So which bad storm? So we're going to talk about the rainstorm of 1996. Okay, great. Now, so what? What about it? What's so important about it? And so the thesis statement is basically explaining why you're talking about it. What's the purpose of talking about this specific rainstorm? So, and obviously it's how it changed their life and how it made them like feel more confident in themselves. So that's basically what an inverted triangle is. So here's an example of how we took this, basically like this triangle here, and we're turning it into an introduction paragraph. Notice that the introductions and conclusions are not going to be as long as your body paragraphs, because your body paragraphs are typically going to be housing 2 quotes, and then you're going to have to explain each quote with 2 to 3 sentences, plus transitions and all that good stuff. So I would say, and it's not a hard and fast rule, but I would say your introductions should be at least probably 4 to 5 sentences. But like I said, it just depends. You might make it a little longer, but don't make it so long. So your introduction shouldn't be like a page long. I would say max it should be like half a page roughly. So don't make it too long. So the Midwestern states experience a wide variety of weather, from bright, sunshiny springs and mild winter to wild summer storms. Okay, looking back at this triangle, this is the part where you guys are typing in the chat. Which one did that first sentence fall under? So everybody should be responding. So again, if you don't want to be marked absent today, like I was talking to another student earlier, make sure you guys are participating in the chat. So this first sentence, the Midwestern states experience a wide variety of weather, blah, blah, blah. Which one of these inverted triangle categories does it fall under? Okay, thank you, Miguel. Now I need to see responses from everybody else. Thank you, Alan, Jesus. Jesus, maybe not, maybe like look at, Ryan, look at, again, the triangle that's on my screen. Okay, and there was a key word in there. So if you didn't get it, the Midwestern states experience a wide variety of weather. Good. Okay, thank you. So next sentence, the bad weather are storms and tornadoes get the most attention. One storm in particular, the record-breaking rainstorm that took place in September of 1996, will always stand out to me because it shaped who I am today. During that storm, I had to abandon my car in a flash flood. It was the most frightening experience of my life, but I learned that I am stronger than I think. So again, notice how like the last 2 sentences kind of go together. It shaped who I am today, but then they get more. No, you're not answering again. I just asked for the one, Aaron. Thank you though. So the second to last sentence where it says because it shaped who I am today. Sometimes some of your guys' thesis statements, you would stop there, but look how much more specific that they got in that last sentence. So I want to make sure that you guys are able to do the same thing. So please make sure that you guys are, when you're writing your thesis statement, you want to be as specific as possible. So in the essay that we're going to be doing, we're going to be talking about multiple stories. So you'll need to be able to explain which stories you're talking about. and basically how it fits into your opinion, essentially. So, like I said, I'll explain the prompt next week when we get to it. But for right now, we're just talking about the introductions. All right. So we're doing narrative intro. What was the name of that last introduction we did? What was it called? Okay, Alan, you're half there. It was 2 words. It was another word for upside down and then a shape. So what was it? There we go. Thank you, Camilla. Thank you, Alan. Ricardo, Aaron, good. Brandon, nice. Okay, there's a lot of you, so let's keep going. Okay,
Mister, I don't know why it doesn't let me type in the chat, or I can't see the chat either.
If you click on, maybe, again, I'm not on an iPad, so it might look a little different, but if you click on more, you might see the chat there. If it's not in your toolbar already.
I could get to it, but it doesn't show nothing. Like, it shows like no one's been like saying nothing.
That's because I have it for host only, so only I'm seeing the responses.
Oh.
So that's why, yeah. All right, so Joshua, it wasn't upside down. Again, there was another word for upside down, but you got the right concept. All right, so if you didn't get it, it was inverted triangle. So that was the first type of introduction that we'd covered. All right, so the next one is a narrative intro, and basically narrative is exactly how it sounds. When you write a narrative, you're telling a story. So basically, you're going to be telling a story that is related to the topic that you're going to be discussing. It obviously, if you're talking about, like, for the extra credit essay, if you're talking about NCAA players getting paid, maybe you're not talking about Madden unless it's related to, like, if you're going to make it tie into the topic, maybe, but it's not going to be about like you going to the store or anything, because that has nothing to do with college players getting paid, right? So maybe it's a story about athletes that who are not going to be able to get paid money when they go to college. Okay, so somebody was saying that their internet is going off and on. So just remember that if you ever miss anything, it will be available on YouTube and on Canvas. So you will be able to see stuff that you missed if you do miss anything. But this is a very important topic, so I do want to make sure that everybody gets this information. So for the narrative, again, you only are going to be telling the story during the introduction. The story is just a way to get the reader interested in the topic that you're going to be discussing. And it always still needs to end with your thesis statement. So every one of these introductions, no matter which one you choose, will always end with the purpose of your essay. So you're going to tell me your story. And then after your story is done, you're going to be telling me, what is the point of this essay? Why are you writing it? So again, in the case of the extra credit essay, do you agree or disagree with the idea of college players getting paid for advertisements and endorsements and stuff like that? Okay. So that's what the narrative is. So again, it might not work in all situations, but I will say that I do feel like a narrative will work in most situations. But again, you just have to read the prompt and think about, can I make this work? If not, great. I'll be honest with you, narrative is usually one of my favorite kinds of introductions, because I think that storytelling is a great way to get people interested and engaged in what you're going to be talking about. So here's an example. Sarah was in the small bedroom of her apartment, putting her infant son to sleep. As she was coming out of his room, she heard a loud thud. She looked down the hallway to see someone banging hard against the apartment door. As Sarah rushed back into the bedroom, she saw the front door burst open and a man she didn't know came through. Sarah slammed the bedroom door, grabbed the baby from the crib, and ran into the bedroom closet. She shut the closet door, still holding the baby in one arm, and started to frantically feel around for the shoebox that she kept hidden at the back of the closet. So again, the story is got us engaged. There's suspense, there's anticipation. We don't know what's going to be coming next. So that's where the engagement part comes in. Now, she hasn't said the point of her essay yet. She's only told the story, But notice it didn't take a page to tell either, right? So I think that a lot of people, when they're doing a narrative intro, can sometimes get carried away with the story and forget that they're actually just writing an essay. So this one was probably a little longer than like the inverted triangle one, for example, but it still needs to end like this. This essay will show that access to guns should not be further restricted so that people like Sarah have access to firearms for personal protection. Okay, so that makes a clear statement about this is the point of my essay. And again, they related it back to the story. So people like Sarah, the person in the story. So again, making that connection. So that's one big thing that I think that is going to enhance a lot of your guys' writing is thinking about how connections can be made. That's why I've been so pushing you guys on the transition statements in between quotes at the end of your paragraphs. So that's something that I want you guys to really focus on is making connections and really thinking about like how each sentence kind of goes into each other. Another big thing to note here is that this story was completely made up. So it's not, unless you're like writing for a journalistic reason, because you write for like, a newspaper and you write a story that's not true, you're going to get called out on it and probably damage your career. But in the interest of this writing, the essay, like, I'm not necessarily going to fact check you on this. So the story can be made up, but I would definitely keep it grounded in reality. I don't want it to be like anything crazy, like as far as like it shouldn't be like an action movie. It should be something that could happen in real life and not just in Hollywood. So make sure that you keep that in mind when you're doing the narratives. Okay, next one, interrogative intro. The big thing that you guys need to know about the word interrogative is it sounds like what word? What does interrogative sound like? And you could unmute yourself if you want to, or you could type it either way, but what does interrogative sound like? What word? Good, Alan. Okay, some other people. Kathleen, nice. Okay, and I just want to make sure we're moving along, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but the interrogative intro is about interrogating or questioning. So this is the worst habit that I think middle teachers have created for you, and I want to make sure that you guys are getting away from it, but I don't want you guys to sound like cheesy infomercial salesmen, okay? So I don't want you to sound like, have you ever been in this situation, or what happens if your car breaks down, So let's try to get away from that. So the way I would say for the interrogative, you always start and end your paragraph with a statement. First sentence should basically be like an intro into the topic you're going to be discussing. And then you're going to give a question for each body paragraph. So let's say you do 4 body paragraphs. How many questions should you have? Just asking for a number here. Good. So if you need one question for each body paragraph, there's 4 body paragraphs. So how many questions do you need? Yeah, so you need 4. Right, exactly. Thank you, everyone. So you're going to basically create a question that's going to be answered. So that's the problem with the way that you guys have been taught to do like the question for like your hook is that a lot of times the question that you ask at the beginning never gets answered. So we want to make sure that whatever questions you ask, you're going to be answering later on in your writing. So again, several questions. So not just one question. It needs to be however many body paragraphs you have, that's how many questions you need to be having as well. So here's an example. So notice that again, it starts and ends with a statement. Everyone wants to be happier, but we don't often know if our choices will lead to happiness. So in this case, the topic is going to be happiness. So now we're going to get into the questions that will be answered in the body paragraphs. Will more money bring more happiness? Does religion or faith in a higher power make people happier? Do we even have a right to happiness at all? So in this case, how many questions were there? So how many body paragraphs will there be? Okay, good. Most of you got it. There's 3 questions. Now, and I don't want to confuse you, but I will say that as we get more into this school year, some of these topics could technically be multiple paragraphs. You technically could have two paragraphs on, for example, money was one of the topics, religion was another topic. You could have two paragraphs. So, like, if you were saying religion, maybe you're going to talk about religion making people happy, and then maybe you talk about like one way that religion makes you happy, and then another way that religion can make you happy. So those are, again, these are just topics that are going to be addressed, and these are questions that are going to be answered. So don't ask a question that you're not going to answer, basically. And then finally, we end with our thesis statement. This essay will seek to answer those questions by looking at the teachings of the Dalai Lama, insights from Gretchen Rubin, and opinions from C.S. Lewis. And this comes from actually a prompt that my wife, she's not teaching it this year, but that she has taught in the past. So it's about like, it's called the Happiness Project, and it's basically about like learning about what makes people happy. It's a really interesting concept, but there's no exact right number of questions to ask. But again, it's however many questions you plan on answering in your writing. So again, this is an easy one to do, honestly, but it does force you to think about like what you're going to be talking about later in your body paragraphs before you actually get to them. So it definitely makes you have to plan out what your essay is going to be. Okay, next one, paradoxical intro. This one is probably one of the more complicated ones because a paradox itself is kind of a complicated thing. But a paradox is essentially where something seems wrong, but it could be right at the same time. So basically, it's something that runs counter to common expectations or knowledge. So everybody expects this to be true about something, but there's actually like a little bit of a twist where it's actually not true. So this one, I won't spend too much time on it just because I do feel like it can be complicated and it kind of confuses people more than anything. But so this is an example of a paradox, this sign, no stopping, and then it says end. Well, if it's end, shouldn't I be stopping? But they don't want you to stop at the end of the trail. They want you to keep moving, even though it's the end of the trail. So that's what a paradox is. So here's an example. In his chapter on reading, Henry David Thoreau presents his arguments on various aspects of reading, including who should read and what they should be reading. One of the more interesting arguments that he makes is that literature is the highest form of art because it can be translated into any language and taken anywhere. Later, however, so again, now we're getting to the paradox part, Thoreau argues that one should read texts in their original language in order to fully understand them. We will explore how he supports both of these seemingly contradictory arguments, as well as many others in this essay. So I'll explain this a little bit more in easy to understand terms, but basically what they're saying is that Henry David Thoreau, who would be considered like a philosopher in a lot of ways, but he's making the argument that literature, so writing, is the highest form of art because it can be translated into any language. So there's lots of books and stories that were written in one language that have been translated to a different language. For example, the Metamorphosis was not originally written in English, it was translated. So that's an example of it being translated. So that's why he's saying it's the highest form of art. Later, however, Thoreau argues that one should read it in their original language. So he's saying that it's best to read stuff in their original language. So for those of you who like speak a different language other than English, you know that there are some words in like the original language that don't necessarily translate to English, but also vice versa. There's some words in English that don't translate well to other languages. So if you read it in the original language, you'll get the original meaning. But at the same time, it can also be, again, literature is also very important and very a high form of art, like it says, because it can be translated. So even though they're two opposite kind of things, they can both be true at the same time. Like I said, I know that's a little complicated, but basically it's just another option for you. If you want to get something where it seems like here's one thing that can exist versus another, this is the introduction for you. Okay, mind the gap. So minding the gap is a British term that, so if you ever go to like one of their subways or the tube, as they like to call it, you'll hear the little like the robotic announcement saying, please mind the gap. And what that basically means is, don't fall to your death onto the train track. So minding the gap, when we say that for mind the gap introduction, it's basically you're filling in gaps in people's knowledge of a topic. So if you have a topic, so for example, for the extra credit essay we're doing, you might know that NCAA college players don't get paid. What you might not know is that they now have an opportunity to get paid. So again, that's a way that you can fill in the gap. So here's an example of it. And yes, here's a little picture of the subway. So the gap would be in between the platform, the yellow platform here, and getting onto the train. That's the gap that they're referring to. When we think of happiness, we only think of it in positive terms. Increasing happiness is more often linked to things like improving your mental and physical well being, building stronger relationships, attaining better status or financial security. But what few people realize is that happiness is also directly tied to sadness. In order to truly be happy, we have to know suffering, pain, and loss so we can appreciate when our life is improving. So in this case, the gap is people only think of happiness in terms of happiness, of like making yourself, of improving things. But what a lot of people don't realize, so here's the gap that they're filling in, is that in order to be happy, you have to know what sadness is in order to have happiness. Because if you don't have sadness, how can you ever really be happy? How do you know you're happy if you don't know what sadness and pain feel like? So that's the minding the gap part that is being discussed there. Okay, so now we're at the end of the presentation. Now we're at the part of what you're going to be doing. So you have access to all these slides on Canvas. So if you go to this week's module, so 11:30 to 12:04, and you go to resources, you'll see these slides in there. So if you weren't really able to see the slides, you can access all these slides on Canvas. It'll say intro and conclusion slides. But you will write an introduction using the strategies that we talked about today. So for your extra credit essay, you do have to do the introduction and conclusion at minimum. Technically, the body paragraphs will be optional. That's the extra credit part. But you will be turning in an introduction for this topic about California students, again, college students having the opportunity to get compensation for the use of their name and image. So you are going to use one of the 5 strategies, not all 5, just one of them. So pick inverted triangle, narrative, interrogative, paradoxical, or mind the gap. So it says each person in your group. It used to be a group assignment. I honestly forgot to delete that, but so you're going to be doing this individually, and you're going to pick one. So, but on your paper, on your Google Doc that you turn in, please write out which one that you're attempting to do. I honestly don't care if you don't get it 100% right. We're practicing our writing right now. So again, try your best, be like bold about it and try to like make it like really good. And if you screw up, that's okay. But I want to be able to see which one you're attempting to do, because if you do screw up, like I said, Aaron, the introduction and conclusion are going to be mandatory because we're practicing the introduction and conclusion. So you have to do the introduction today. I don't care about the rest of it. So we'll do the introduction today. We're going to write the conclusion on Thursday. And if you want to do the other 3 body paragraphs by next Thursday or next Friday, I mean, you guys can. But the introduction has to be worked on today. So this will need to be done by, technically, it'll be due by midnight tomorrow. But frankly, you guys should be able to get it done during the asynchronous part of class. So there's some of you who make really good use of the asynchronous time, and there's some people who do not. I suggest that you make good use of it so that way you guys don't fall behind. But this is what you guys are going to be working on. So I want you guys, before I split you up, to type which one you think you're going to be using, and then make sure that you type it in your Google Doc when you're working on this as well. So which introduction, inverted triangle, narrative, interrogative, paradoxical, or mind the gap, which type of intro do you think you're going to use? Okay, I see interrogative, inverted, narrative, mind the gap. Another narrative. All right. So, as always, I'm going to put you in your break